Hi everybody! Welcome to the third tutorial video for Imperial Commander. In this video I'll tell you about how to handle the actual gameplay aspect of the app. This tutorial begins right after starting a mission. If you want to know how we got to this point, just check out the previous video. Again, I won't be able to cover all the details, so make sure to check the official wiki if you have any questions. You can find the link in the video description. Let's get started. This is the main gameplay screen. I'll explain each section one by one, but here's an overview. To the left you have your heroes and allies. The main part of the gameplay screen shows the deployed Imperial groups. To the right you can perform various forms of manual deployments and manually increase or decrease threat. The bottom row shows a couple of icons to start the next activation, manipulate the mission, and of course end the round and start the next one. I'll begin with the Rebels section. This part of the screen shows your heroes and any deployed allies as well as the state of health therein. Please keep in mind that Imperial Commander does not handle Rebel activations. Just use the activation tokens provided with the game, as usual. The circle at the bottom is to toggle a hero between healthy, green, and wounded, red. This is important because the app usually only targets healthy heroes. If a hero has to withdraw, just click or tap on the thumbnail to dim it and tell the app the hero is no longer present. If you did this by accident, you can just undo it by clicking or tapping again. This also works for allies. However, since allies don't have multiple states of health, marking an ally as wounded automatically withdraws it. Next is the enemy section. This area shows you any deployed Imperial groups with a thumbnail. You can use the colored circle at the top left to assign colors to a group. Do this to distinguish between multiple groups of the same type, just as you would with the colored tokens. The app automatically exhausts a group after its activation. Exhausted groups are dimmed. However, you can click or tap the thumbnail to manually exhaust already a group. You can also right-click a group to display its deployment card. That's a trick that works on allies too. If you're on a touchscreen, swipe over the thumbnail to display the card. When you right-click a thumbnail, the app also displays the ignored abilities. These are the abilities on the deployment cards of the group that you have to ignore. All other abilities work as usual. Usually the app decides which Imperial group to activate next. However, if you need to manually activate a group for any reason, just click or tap the arrow at the top right of the thumbnail. This only works on ready groups of course and exhausts them afterwards. The circles at the bottom show you how many figures there are in a group. The number of circles is the maximum number of figures. Green circles are deployed figures. When you defeat a figure, click or tap a circle to switch it to red and mark the figure as defeated. Likewise, you can redeploy a figure by clicking or tapping the circle again if you did this by accident. Once you defeat the last figure of a group, you defeat the entire group. When using adaptive difficulty, this rewards you with fame and reimburses part of the threat to the Imperial player. So, here's how gameplay usually looks like. At the start of a round, you perform a Rebel activation as usual. After that, you click or tap the Imperial logo on the bottom left. The app then decides which group to activate and displays the respective instruction. That decision is mostly random. If you want to know details, just hit the mechanics section of the official wiki. The instruction window gives you all the information you need. Again, you can right-click or swipe the thumbnail to display the deployment card. The thumbnail also shows you the assigned color. Also, in each activation, an enemy group randomly gains one of multiple bonus effects, displayed at the top. Just above the bonus effects, the instructions list the ignored abilities again. The main part of the window are the instructions. You activate each figure of the group, starting with the figure closest to a rebel, and resolve the instructions from top to bottom. Imperial figures, like rebels, have two actions. For each arrow icon, the figure needs to spend one action. Only one of those actions may be an attack action, however, except when the instructions or the deployment card explicitly tells you otherwise. Attack actions are marked by the little explosion in front of the arrow. You resolve the instructions from top to bottom, spending as many actions as possible to a maximum of 2. Instructions that are preceded by a square do not require an action, so they can usually be resolved in any activation. If you cannot resolve an instruction, either because the conditions can't be met or the figure has no actions left, you skip the line. Once you reach the bottom of the instruction list, the activation ends and the next figure in the group activates. Once all figures have been activated, the group activation ends altogether. Most instructions should be easy to follow, but some might need more explanation. I'll run you through the instructions of an elite probe droid as an example, but more information can be found in the wiki. At the top you can see the bonus effect. It's pretty self-explanatory. Note that some bonus effects might have the same name as abilities you know from the deployment cards, but they often work differently, so make sure to read the effect carefully. The instruction list starts with an instruction preceded by a square. This means that it doesn't take any action to resolve. The probe droid automatically gains +1 damage and +2 accuracy for any attack it makes in this round. The next instruction is an attack instruction. The probe droid gains 3 movement points and moves as far as possible toward the designated hero to perform an attack. By the way, if it cannot attack the designated target, it tries to attack the closest healthy rebel instead. The droid then tries to engage as many rebels as possible, meaning it tries to be adjacent to them. If the droid was able to resolve the previous instructions, the activation ends. If it was unable to, for example because it couldn't get within line of sight or was unable to engage a rebel with 2 movement points, it would have just skipped the instructions it cannot resolve altogether. Skipped instructions do not cost an action, and of course the figure doesn't get anything out of it. For example, if the droid skipped the second instruction, it did not gain any movement points. If it skipped the previous instruction, it moves 2 to reposition 3. This means that it gains 2 movement points and tries to get in a position where it is at least 3 spaces away from the closest rebel. If it can't perfectly fulfill a reposition instruction, it does not skip the line. It just tries to be as close to that instruction as possible. Go down the list until the droid has spent both actions, then its activation ends. After an Imperial activation ends, the rebels go again if they have any activations left. Once the next rebel activation has ended, you simply activate the next enemy group. Repeat this until all rebels and Imperial groups have been activated. Then you can end the round with a button on the bottom right. At the end of the round, the app increases threat and readies all enemy groups. It might also reinforce or deploy new groups by spending threat. Just deploy the groups or figures it tells you to. Then the next round starts.
You won't be giving us any more trouble.
Pretty much all missions feature mission events with various triggers. The events are found in the campaign guide, but you shouldn't read ahead to avoid spoiling yourself. That's where the mission information comes in handy. Use the mission info button at the bottom to call up the mission information. That window tells you a lot of things. At the top you might find some special information that's necessary. For example, in Chain of Command, Weiss, the Imperial officers and the probe droids don't follow the normal displayed instructions. They instead have their own instructions to follow. The instructions are listed in the mission rules, which I'll explain later. Almost all missions also feature a repositioning target. This tells you in which direction a figure moves when resolving a reposition instruction. In that case, most groups try to block the way to Weiss. Some missions also feature a mission target. Mission targets override the targets randomly designated in the instructions. For example, in the mission Temptation, all enemies try to attack Diala Pasil, regardless of what their instructions say. The mission info also gives you the victory conditions and, most importantly, the event triggers. The info window only lists the triggers and event names to avoid spoiling too much. As soon as you meet the condition of a trigger, the Imperial representative refers to the campaign guide to resolve the event. Some events have special rules in Imperial Commander. If that is the case, the mission info window tells you to consult the mission rules when resolving that event. In this example, the event Vulnerable requires you to view the mission rules. The mission rules button is right next to the mission info button. Here you can see, for example, the mission instructions. All Imperial officers and probe droids interact for free with a terminal adjacent to them at the start of their activation. Weiss, meanwhile, gains more complex instructions. You don't have to memorize the instructions, by the way. The mission info and mission rules windows can be viewed even when an instruction window is already open. At the bottom of the mission rules window, you can find details for events. Mission events often tell you to deploy reserved groups or increase or decrease threat. You can modify threat on the right of the gameplay screen. Just use the scroll wheel or click and drag left or right to set the amount, then apply the change. When on a touchscreen, swipe left or right. For deployment, you have various manual deployment options at the top right of the screen. Using manual deployment, you can deploy any group you wish. One important thing to keep in mind: manual deployment does not affect threat in any way. Manually deployed groups will always be deployed at no cost. If you want to deploy a group with a threat cost, you need to manually decrease the threat afterwards. You'll most often want to use manual deployment to deploy reserved groups. Just click or tap on Reserved and deploy the group you want. However, you can also use manual deployment to deploy any ally or enemy groups, including unique groups. Please keep in mind that villains can never be added to the initial or reserved groups. If you want to deploy a villain at any time, just click or tap Enemy and select the villain.
Set blasters on full.
The last option is random deployment. Some missions, for example Zaska Teft's personal mission Shady Dealings, require the Imperial player to gather a number of groups up to a certain threat threshold, for example twice the threat level. In Imperial Commander, you can easily replicate this by using random deployment. Just use the button and tell the app the amount of threat to use. For example, When setting it to 15 threat, the app randomly deploys groups with a total threat cost of 15. Those groups are not chosen from the open groups, but from all available groups. You can also use this to ramp up the challenge if you're feeling bored, of course. And that's it for manual deployment. Imperial Commander also features random events. At the end of each round, there's a chance that a random event might be displayed. If that is the case, the event window clearly tells you what to do. Just follow the instructions. Give me a second, I'm going to try and trigger one.
Giving us any more trouble. Is that slot real or something?
We're almost done. The last thing I want to explain is the colorful row of buttons at the bottom. I'll start from the left. The Imperial logo, of course, activates the next group. Next to it is the Rebel Alliance logo. This is only active when adaptive difficulty is selected. Opening this window displays your current fame and any awards you might get and explains how to spend awards. I already explained the mission rules and mission info buttons. Next to it you can pause deployment. As long as this is toggled on, Imperial Commander will no longer deploy groups at the end of a round. Some events require you to pause deployment, but you can also do this at any time you need the Empire to cut you some slack. To the right of that you can pause threat gain. When toggled on, the Empire no longer gains threat at the end of a round. The button to the right of that is very important. Many mission events require you to resolve an optional deployment. If some event calls for this, simply click this button. It's easy as that. The second to last button displays the settings. You can toggle some options here or exit the app. Last but certainly not least is the Imperial Hand button. You usually don't need to use this, and it's more fun if you don't, because it tells you how much threat the Empire has and what groups are in the Imperial Hand. At the top you see the current threat, as well as the current deployment modifier. The deployment modifier is simply used by the app to determine the type of deployment event, so you can ignore it. Beneath that, the window lists any groups currently in the Imperial Hand. You can click or tap the X to remove a group from the hand, removing it from the mission altogether. By the way, if you do this by accident, simply manually deploy the group again and immediately defeat it to send it back to the Imperial Hand. Like I said, you usually don't need to use the Imperial Hand window, but you might be curious, and some rare events require you to manipulate the groups in the Imperial Hand. This is also a way to remove all groups from the hand in missions where the Empire shouldn't start with open groups, but in my opinion that's usually not necessary. This pretty much covers all there is to know. Just play the mission and once you're done, close the app or return to the title. Don't forget to check the fame window before you do, however, to see if there are any awards waiting for you. Well, this wraps up quite a long video. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching and have fun with Imperial Commander and an amazing board game.